What is going on, Rotogrinders? Dean here, Dean78904 on the DFS circles. It is the NFL Pick 6 show starring Rich Hribar, you know him from Sharp Football Analytics, John Daigle, you know him from Roto-World. What's up, guys? Two of the sharpest minds in all of football, talking football on a Wednesday night. It is important to note, yes, we are live on YouTube. We'll do our best to monitor the comments. If you guys say something interesting over there, we will acknowledge it. We'll have a conversation about it. But if you guys are watching this on replay, this is Wednesday night, and the NFL is fluid. And some things might be chalky on Wednesday, and some players might be playing on Wednesday, and you're watching it on Friday, and all of a sudden they're not playing. So keep that in mind. John, what's going on? How are things in your world? I was telling you before the slate, I was telling both of you guys, this is a gross slate. I don't like it. I don't mind saying it to the people. I'm going to still play. I don't like it, though.
I don't know about two of the sharpest, but certainly two of the most tired after a Tuesday game. Throws our routine completely off track. But we're here. We're excited. It's going to feel better tomorrow night when there's no football. But yeah, I think we're still just, our brains are catching up right now. Having said that, yeah, I am very interested in this slate. It's an ugly one. It's a one where you wake up and you hate your lineup on Sunday mornings because it's not so chalky. There might not even be chalky pieces in this entire structure of DFS conversations we're going to have. No matter what show you watch, it feels like one where everyone's going to land on someone different at every position, because that's just kind of how the slate shapes up, since we're losing some top contenders for a doubleheader on Monday night for the main one. So I'm actually really excited about this week.
Yeah, we're losing a lot. Of course, we're going to talk to main slate only. Seattle's not playing. Bye weeks are introduced as well. So no Seattle, no Russ. He's not cooking this week. No New Orleans, no Vegas, no Chargers. Sunday night is Rams, Niners. Monday night, again, another doubleheader, which is great. And the circumstances, of course, are bad how it's happening. But silver lining, it's fun for doubleheader. I suppose it's not that much fun if you guys got to do content for it. I don't have to do content for Monday night games. So, Hribar, are you exhausted for the same reasons that John referenced?
Oh man, it's week 6. I'm way in the can already, man. It's I'm pretty spry weeks 1 and 2, and now I'm there's bye weeks. There's 4 teams off, so I'll take those. We'll live through the bye weeks. But yeah, I mean, the Tuesday game threw a wrench in things. I saw a lot of people tweeting like, "Oh, this is great. There should be football every night." And I was like, I hope there's not football every night. But yeah, I mean, I think this slate is fun. I think it's fun because, we're not just going to have the same, I don't think, especially in head-to-heads, I don't think it will be like the 4v4 like we typically play in head-to-heads or something. I think it's going to be a lot of variance. I think you have a lot of options at running back. I wish the wide receiver position was good this year in fantasy football to make things interesting. But I think it's going to be a fun week where a lot of people can go in a lot of different directions. And I think we will. I think we'll talk about some of these games, but I did want to just bring up, because you brought up before that, that we heard that Dexter is coming back. I think Michael C. Hall ran out of things to do and realized he was out of money.
There's never been a better season finale in TV, but also a series finale, a worse series finale within the same show.
Season 3 or season 4, the John Lithgow season?
Yeah, season 4.
Is it a spoiler alert if I say the bathtub murder scene? I didn't know. The bathtub scene and then, of course, the lumberjack scene are on completely opposite sides of the spectrum. It's not even fair.
Yeah, and shout out Michael C. Hall. He's like 2 of my favorite shows, 2 of the best characters and distinctly different. 6 Feet Under, worth checking out as well, too.
Great series finale. 6 Feet Under, great series finale.
Top 5. That's a top 5 series finale.
Great show in general.
That. Oh, I love that show. It's so good. Find that if you guys aren't aware. It's on the HBO Max. This show, not sponsored by HBO Max, but, there you go. Give to the people.
It can be. HBO. It can be.
I'm up for it.
We should mention, by the way, before we kind of dive in, yes, what's up, YouTube? Feel free to like and subscribe. We do appreciate that. And again, our eyes will be on the chat if anything interesting pops up. Obviously, if it's relevant to the conversation we're having, you guys are on a slight delay, but we'll do our best to keep up with that. But Rotogrinders, they're presenting on Fanduel this week, not just this week, but weeks 6 through 13, the Fanduel single entry series. And I know I'm just supposed to say this because I work for RG, but I'm telling you, I love this. It's a single entry series. There's not enough single entry contests out there, in my opinion. How that works is you play it like any other normal contest. You sign it up for any normal contest. You see it in the lobby, and it has the RG logo next to it. There's 3 different buy-in levels: $5, $33, $100, and it goes from weeks 6 through 13. And the top 4 combined scores within each tier, the top 2 finishers of that, they'll take your top 4. So if you take your 4 best scores, so it does help you play every single week, you increase your chances, yada, yada. The top 2 finishers in each tier advance to a 6-man, $20,000 final. It's just added value. And not just that, I'm big on flat contests as far as flat payout. Atop the $100 I think is like 12% paid to first. The $33, I want to say, is like 8 or 9% paid to first. And I saw some contests this last week, like 50% paid to first. Like I can't play that. I don't know what you guys like at big MME contests, but Daigle, do you have a preference? For me, I love a good flat payout. I love a great, big size contest as far as single entry. That's my wheelhouse. How about yourself?
Yeah, that's why it always changes for me when I talk about tournaments, because I'm more of a 10% to first and a flatter payout like that. Mm-hmm. And I play a bunch of the mid to high stakes for that payout, like, well, I don't know. It's like a 50 to 150 person tournaments, like the 150 to 300 entries. Those are my kind of games where I don't have to play Chase Claypool, for instance, last week to win the tournament.
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, I had so much Deontay Johnson. My day was, the whole thing on Fanduel with the scoring of like like I didn't really have to log in and see, like, I knew I wasn't doing well. It's like, I had a ton of Deontay Johnson. So it was
I prefer to have like a top 2% lineup and not a top 0.2% lineup to get money back. That's the way I look at tournaments.
All right. Hribar, do you have a preference as far as contest, or it's just sort of like wherever? Because that's one of the things we don't talk about enough. And again, we're going to talk to slate in a second, 3 games specifically. We'll talk about Houston, Tennessee, Detroit, Jacksonville, Green Bay, Tampa. And just those 3 teams, 3 matchups alone should tell you that this slate is not pretty, although they're all high and tight as for what it's worth. High totals, expected to be close games. But those are our feature games, Detroit and Jacksonville. Of course, it's from a DFS perspective and not a watchability or like these are the best teams in the league perspective. But do you have thoughts on that, Hribar, as far as contests you prefer?
Yeah, I'm more of a single entry 3 max, looking for short entries, typically under like 1,200 and lower. But definitely trying to I'm trying to beat like only a certain portion of the field, instead of definitely trying to thread the needle here, on like some of these contests like the Millie and stuff like that. So definitely I'm in that boat where I'm looking to aim small, miss small, in a sense. Is where I'm at, and that's where I tend to shop. But I mean, that's kind of what you look for. The flattest payouts you can find. It varies from site to site. What you can look for. I mean, granted, after everything that happened, last weekend, I don't know. Like, I guess we don't really have to touch on that. But it happened on both sites too. It wasn't just one site. If you play college DFS, it happened on the other site as well. So we don't have to. We don't have to throw stones or say anything. But it was an ugly weekend for everything that happened last week. But I'm glad that everything is. We're all pushing on. We're all going to play again. So I mean, they've got us. They've got us over a barrel. What are you going to do?
I think the slant is as frisky as I typically get on DK but I mean, that's still a flat payout for a $9 entry. Like that's more than fair. So that's usually the tournament I suggest to everyone because that's fun recreationally and just smart for the payout.
That's one of my favorite contests on DK to play, but single entry, flat payouts. It's super in contest selection. Like I was talking to somebody this past weekend, and we'll talk about the slate in a second. I swear, but I think this is important to get out there. But they were like, I put up this score and I barely won it. I'm like, well, why? Like, what contest did you enter? And it turns out it's like, you just entered the wrong contest. That was a problem. All right, let's move on. First game on tap, Houston at Tennessee. Tennessee is -3.5. 53.5 is the total. So, Daigle, what did we learn about the new Houston, the Romeo Crennel regime? What are we to expect? Did we learn anything from game 1? Is there anything we can take away as far as going forward?
That every team should play the Jaguars defense every single week. No. So they actually ran more play action. They were previously running the league's 3rd lowest rate, but they finally threw Desean Watson under center and allowed him to run 29% play action. He also had 17% of his balls go 20 plus yards downfield. So we're allowing him to throw downfield more. Again, I do wonder how much of it is the Jaguars' top 3 defenders, as we talked about last week, being absent, but we should still be encouraged now because this offense is somewhat different. And as we always talked about, the schedule has opened up in general. We're talking about this game now against the Titans because it's another good game. So we were really just waiting for them to get past the murderer's row of those 3 opponents they opened with in the AFC against the Steelers, Chiefs, and Ravens. And now they're in the friendly portion of their schedule and did at least a few things differently. So throwing downfield more play action, we can have confidence in him, I believe, going back to him this week.
So one of the things I like to do before we do this show is I go to the RG lineup HQ. We have our projections. Obviously, again, it's Wednesday night, and I run like 150 optimal lineups and just kind of see what it sort of spits out at me. And 27% is giving me Desean Watson at quarterback on DK. On Fanduel, he's the number 1 quarterback at 24%. Again, you guys are talking about, there's not necessarily one quarterback or one player that stands out as far as a slate. with a few outliers, obviously. But right now we're seeing Watson and then Jackson and Fitzpatrick, Minshew. It's a who's who of quarterbacks that we love playing in DFS, obviously. Hribar, any takeaways there? And as of right now on a Wednesday night, is Watson your like de facto like shell lineup cash quarterback right now?
He's definitely in play. I haven't decided yet as I dig in, because the thing about Watson is he hasn't really shown us that he has that ceiling that we want yet. And, part of it is because he's just not running, like he was, in years past. I mean, his season high is 27 rushing yards. He only had 25, rushing yards last week with all the dropbacks. But, it's just that's what he needs to kind of crash that ceiling. But this game could go back and forth. Like Daigle said, there was a nice little spike in play action usage. Granted, they had positive game script. They're a team too that like they typically don't. You see a lot of teams. Positive game script invites more play action, and more teams go away from it when they are trailing. So we'll see, if that is something that stickies if they're trailing, as road, or if they're trailing on the road as road dogs. But even going back to the Pittsburgh game, though, it's 3 games in a row he's averaged over 9 yards per pass attempt. So there's been some encouraging signs that he's turned the corner. I would like to see a little more ceiling out of him and some more running still. But yeah, he's definitely in the mix when you look at the quarterback options on this slate. And then he's really easy just to pair with. That's how everyone fell last week. I mean, Will Fuller has been pretty steady. Even his, floor games are good now because he's finding the end zone and he's getting intermediate targets. And then, people just immediately went right back to Brandon Cooks because of just how many routes he's running. He's on the field. I mean, granted, when everyone was on him 2 weeks ago, he was getting that exercise in. But, last week they made it a point to give him the football and, he turned in. Since week 1 when he was hurt, he's run a passer on 92% of the dropbacks. And I think that's something people have looked at this season. I think that's like the stat, du jour this year. We had target share, kind of come to the fold and everyone cited target share and air yards. This year it feels like everyone's talking about routes per dropback, like no matter what. It feels like that's the thing everyone's honing in on. That's the next thing to like put in the portfolio. And he's one of those guys, and that's why his ownership was so high last week, outside of, it being a good matchup and people wanted to pair somebody with Watson as well. Why people went to him. And, when we talk about the Jaguars game, there's another guy in the exact same spot Cooks was in last week in that spot as well. So, I mean, Houston's really easy to play on their side. We don't really want to mess with David Johnson because he's shown it. He's had 2 really good matchups in a row. He didn't play bad last week, and he could have had a touchdown on a overthrow from Desean Watson, but two or fewer catches in every game since week 1, season high of 3, not really involved in the pass game, needs a touchdown to kind of get there. We don't really have to chase with him. Road dog. It's just easy to play the Texans side. We know what we want to do with them.
I do wonder how high Cooks' ownership would have been, though, if there were other options to pay up for, because there was nothing last week. That's why I was talking about I almost ended up on Ruggs, and instead I was just like 1 or 2% Ruggs because there was nowhere else to go. So we just looked down. That's why Olamide was so rostered, because we had to just go for cheap options to get all these expensive running backs we wanted. So without DeAndre Hopkins on this slate, we could end up on these cheap guys yet again.
Yeah, is there anything to explain why the rushing yards are just not there for Watson, or is it small sample size? Is this just like an active choice? Was it coaching? Was it just where they were lining up? Or can I expect it going forward in the future? What should I assume as far as Watson's rushing? What do you have for me there, Daigle?
I really don't know. I know the Titans have averaged the league's 7th lowest pressure rate so far, so we shouldn't expect him to really threaten him behind the line of scrimmage. But does that mean, since he has more time to stand up, we assume that he can take off more or not? Since he hasn't shown it, I don't know. The ceiling I can easily attribute to not having one of the best receivers in the league. I think that's logically simple. DeAndre Hopkins isn't there anymore. They're using Will Fuller for intermediate routes, also getting him involved downfield, of course, but also using him like they used DeAndre Hopkins last year with a median ADOT, whereas Brandon Cooks is a deep threat. And Brandon Cooks splashed this past week because even the coaching staff came out and said, after the game, of course, not before we rostered him everywhere, but after the game, said our intention was to get him involved. We are tired basically using Brandon Cooks and allowing him, as Rich says, to exercise every single week. It's time to get him targets. So who knows if that sticks around this week. Having said that, I can't explain Watson not rushing, but I still think we can have confidence in Will Fuller this week. I mean, because he's been the constant this year. 18 points per game in his 4 healthy starts and appearance on milk cartons around Houston, and the 1 game he was on the trainer's table. So I think it's pretty easy to still say he's a strong wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, who I would even argue is matchup proof, despite Brandon Cook still being around.
Hribar, no Kittle, no Kelsey on the main slate. There is Andrews, but collectively this tight end, the collection of tight end options this week are pretty gross. I think if Aiken sits, you can consider a guy like Fells who got there in one catch last week. But on the other side, there's Jonnu Smith in this game, and he's one of those guys that's popping up in the optimals. But the other part of it is like he's been lucky, super lucky from a touchdown variance perspective, and also I don't think he's running a ton of routes. He's blocking a lot. There's probably some regression coming there, but you have to click somebody at tight end. They don't DK Fanduel, they'll refuse your lineup if you don't pick one. So he's like kind of the best option if you can't get to Andrews. What am I doing with tight end? Is Jonnu one of the top options?
I think he people will be drawn to him because one, he's been scoring touchdowns, and he caught 2 on prime time, which always helps. Granted it was a primetime game we weren't expecting to get, but it happened and people saw him, and especially the last one was pretty fluky too, especially one because they probably shouldn't even been throwing in that spot, and then that play where Tannehill almost goes past the line and doesn't. By the way, that's one of the worst rules in football. The body part, any body part pass on scrimmage, it doesn't even make any sense. Like where you can just go 2 yards past the line, but if your foot is
drag your toe,
it's it's crazy. It's like one of the weirder rules. But Johnny's been scoring touchdowns. You're right. So because of their offense and the way they operate, he is a guy that does block a lot more per snap than he does routes. He's like a Tyler Higbee and a George Kittle. He was actually below those guys last year. And that's why I was one of the reasons why I was like hesitant to go all in on like a breakout, but he was cheap enough to take some shots on. But he does have 20% of the team targets in each of the past 3 games. He has at least 7 targets in 3 of his 4 games played. So there is some target volume to kind of latch onto. You're right. He has been lucky from a touchdown perspective. So maybe that's a reason why you'd go under in tournaments, or, instead of, have him like be locked in cash. He's a little priced up on DK this week, more palatable on FanDuel, I think, than he is on DK. Where he's 5.2 on DK and 5.8 on FanDuel, because there are some cheaper options on DK where I think you can get away with and sliding, like an Ebron or, talking yourself into someone even grosser. But, I think he's one of the top guys just objectively, especially when you remove the mid-tier. When I was doing, submitting rankings this week, and, we have the top guys. We have the Kittle, Kelsey, Andrews tier, right? And Waller's on bye, so he's the next guy. But also, Hunter Henry's on bye too. But it's like when you start removing guys from that middle tier and you realize the gap from like the elite tier and the guys that are just like, okay, like Jared Cook and Hunter Henry, when you remove those guys and you immediately jump to just like the Dalton Schultz's of the world, you're just like, oh, this position is trash. And that's kind of like where we are. So like Johnny was like a clear tier cutoff, especially on this main slate where it's clearly Andrews and then you've just really got Johnny unless you want to play the corpse of Zach Ertz.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. We like to talk about guys being toast, guys being done, guys being dust. And, he's probably on the Family Feud board, at least from the eye test of, players that are potentially dust this season. Jonnu, is he one of your guys there, John? Again, there's not a lot of options. I was looking at the little less than 30%, 18 catches this season, 5 touchdowns. That's probably not something that's going to be consistent going forward. Good athlete, but opportunity is important. And again, he's blocking a ton, but who else are you going to play? But maybe in tournaments, it's good to get away from him for that reason. And tight ends have, traditionally have the highest variance of the skill position players anyway. So that's probably a good thing to do in tournaments to get away from what I presume will be somewhat chalky there as far as Jonnu Smith. What do you have for me?
It just depends who we get back this game because Adam Humphries came off COVID list. And like that, it should not worry me about A.J. Brown's usage, but it does since this team doesn't put their receivers in a position of strength weekly. They run the same run-heavy offense, allow A.J. Brown and Adam Humphries to run shallow crossing routes, and the ball goes where it goes. They're not trying to get A.J. Brown the ball at all. A.J. Brown is just so good, he earns the ball. So I'm still worried if Corey Davis and Adam Humphries and Jonnu Smith are now all available because we haven't seen that for a full game yet this year. And at that same token, if you don't want to go that route or if all of them are available, you still have Derrick Henry there because Derrick Henry is the running back you're paying up for if you're paying up at running back in this slate. We have no Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, or Zeke. We have Henry here who has out-touched Jeremy McNichols 117-13 on the entire year. And yes, Henry's averaged 3.7 yards per carry, but what does it matter whenever you have 107 touches through 4 games? So yeah, I think that's the smash spot we're looking at that everyone will be paying up in cash games. And then it just depends how you want to run it back in tournaments. And maybe that is Tannehill in a terrific spot against this Texans defense that's still struggling to cover anyone. Maybe it is Jonnu Smith, but I don't know. And on the other side of the ball, you talk about the cutoff for tight ends, he's not the cutoff. He's still below the Mendoza line, of course, but Darren Fells is just out here running routes whenever Jordan Akins is not available. So I know it took a busted coverage, long touchdown for him to get there last week, but he's still out there, at least if Akins is inactive this game. So I think that's another spot to look to.
By the way, we have an old friend of ours here in chat, Eric Crane. What up, chat? What up, Eric? He's
join the chat, but not the show. Crane, I love you.
He's talking about how sexy you guys are. I think he said collectively, I am here, but by association, the three of us. What's up, Crane? Hope things are all well.
Crane's soul is still here. It's always here.
So put this in context where we are, because we have on DK specifically, Derrick Henry 7-3. And I know historically his game doesn't play that great on DK because he doesn't catch the football so much, but he also can get that 100-yard bonus, probably a greater chance than many others. He's 7-3. Aaron Jones is 7-6. Madison is 7-2. Like DK, wow. Life comes at you fast, but that's actually a justified price. We'll talk about him soon enough.
Yep.
How do you feel about Henry versus the guys that are in his tier? Aaron Jones, Madison, I guess Connor at 7-1, Mike Davis at 7K as well.
Yeah, so Derrick Henry, and I've talked about on the show multiple times, he's like the typical dude that I hate to play in DFS.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I hate running backs that don't catch the football, that can be game scripted out. And we haven't seen them play a negative game script yet, even though he has out-touched Jerry McNichols, all those touches. We have not seen them have to chase points at all. Like if they have a couple turnovers or just something fluky happens, we still don't know what will happen with Derrick Henry. Is he going to get targets? Is he going to get carries? But Derrick Henry's also made, a nice career of making me eat it, especially at the end of last year when I didn't want to play him all those weeks when he would just pop off an 80-yard touchdown run and still not catch. It didn't matter. He didn't catch any passes. And he's got one of those matchups right now because Houston has just been deplorable against the run so far this year. So as a home favorite, it is a great spot. He's typically a guy I don't like to play or pay up for. But given this slate, there's still a chance I might not play him in cash, but he is definitely a guy I will monitor throughout the week to see how I want to play his situation, because typically if these guys don't get in the box, they're not going to get there, especially when you pay up for them. So, I mean, he can even have 125 rushing yards, but if he's not going to catch a pass, and if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's not going to get there for you. So, I mean, I'll monitor it throughout the week. We have a couple of the guys that are similar spots like this that I think are interesting pivots that are Derrick Henry-like. I think Jonathan Taylor is a guy like that, that we'll talk about. But the one guy we didn't bring up was A.J. Brown, right? Because he played on Tuesday and they never moved his pricing. And, so his pricing couldn't move because they played.
Oh, 5.6 is a pretty appealing price.
Right. And, I've seen people talk about the Bradley Roby shadow coverage. Like if Bradley Roby's a dude moving you off of guys, then I don't know what to say, man.
Get out the game.
I mean, this is not the show you come to for cornerback, wide receiver matchups. Right. Anyways, we typically don't go down that rabbit hole very deeply. But, I mean, there's scoring upside here for A.J. Brown for the types of targets he gets. And he was a guy that crushed the Texans in both games last year. He played them. And, granted, those aren't the games this year. But, if Corey Davis is still on COVID IR this week, or Adam Humphries, those guys don't come back. We've seen he's already only played 2 games this year, and he has 8 and 9 targets. Like the whole thing about A.J. Brown was how many targets is he going to get? If he can stay in that area for that type of pricing, he offers scoring upside. And we haven't even seen him turn a long one into a house call yet in the 2 games he's played. So, I mean, he's kind of, a glowing orb at his spot right now because his pricing was just frozen being locked into that game on Tuesday.
I actually didn't notice that, honestly, before I talked about him. I didn't realize, I forgot he was on the Tuesday night game. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Is there anything to read into the backup there? Got a decent amount of work there for Tennessee, but maybe that was because it was a Tuesday night, maybe because it was a short week, maybe it was a bit of a blowout. Is there any concern, or you think that's what Tennessee was thinking? Also, the COVID stuff, like any one of those things probably could have factored in, or maybe a combination of, as far as Henry losing some touches. Any concern there?
Oh, no. McNichols, 5 of his touches were when the team led by 3 scores. 5 of his 10 touches. And like I said, he has 13 touches to Henry's 107. And now we take away 5 of those in a blowout. So that tells you how much they still lean on Henry. So you want the touches. It's always easier to play Henry and those guys on Fanduel where we don't care really about the catches anyhow. DK, I mean, that's still a tempting price, but it always comes down to game theory in those situations on DK. We
got anything else, or we're moving on? I think we're moving on. Detroit at Jacksonville, a DFS player's dream. Minus 3.5 is the Lions. 54.5 is the total again. So another game high and tight as far as the as far as the total, and as far as the Vegas thinks this game's gonna be fairly close. I saw somebody in the chat in there. I apologize. I lost it in the stream. What's up, chat? Here on YouTube. Feel free to like and subscribe. I do appreciate that. Thanks for watching. They're talking about Matthew Stafford there, Daigle. As a general rule, maybe it's a hang up, maybe it's a good thing, but I want the quarterbacks with legs. If I can have legs, Stafford, he has legs in theory, literally, but like not football. He doesn't have football legs is a problem. And he can get there by throwing for, 350 and 4 touchdowns, especially against this terrible, the aforementioned, Jacksonville defense. We got to start at Stafford, right?
9 air yards per attempt in Detroit's first 2 games. Kenny Golladay comes back, and then he's limited in that game against the Cardinals week 3. And then week 4 plays his full allotment of snaps, and Stafford, with no coincidence, no surprise, throws for a season high 11 air yards per attempt. So back to something similar to last year's air raid attack where he was top 5 in air yards per attempt. So, of course, this is the reason we played Desean Watson. He was a heavy cash game play last week because this Jaguars defense that was missing C.J. Henderson and Miles Jack and Josh Allen. The list goes on. And these guys, it's only Wednesday, of course, but those same guys have yet to practice on Wednesday, and we will have to keep watching their practice reports. So if they're out again, and even if they play and they're like somewhat limited, I think you could still confidently start Stafford. Now everyone's fully healthy after the bye week, and hope that the offense is something similar to Bevel's scheme from last year. And Watson last week, of course, a season high 10.2 yards per attempt against this Jags defense. So yeah, we should have the utmost confidence in the world in this Lions offense.
Hribar?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if anyone playing the Jags, we want to focus it on. I mean, they're 31st in passing defense EPA. They are 32nd in yards per pass attempt allowed. They've got a number of starters that are banged up or injured that we have to monitor throughout the week and see if they miss time again. I mean, it's already a bad defense, and when you start removing players from a bad defense, it just gets worse. We've seen how the Falcons started the year when they kept having to lose pieces, and we saw that last week with the Jaguars. The only concern here is you would probably worry about just if, what this Lions team will look like in like a positive game script if they just give Adrian Peterson a bunch of carries at some point and they play slow. Because, I mean, the Jaguars have just been like straight up dog walk the past 3 weeks by the Dolphins, the Bengals, and the Texans, like 3 pretty bad teams themselves. And they haven't been remotely in any of those games. So, I mean, that would be your one concern, but the opportunity is here for Stafford to come right out of the bye, kind of like Daigle said, revert to being the kind of passer he was a year ago, and then to really push the ball downfield and get ahead through the air. And, we just need Minshew to kind of do his part and try to pace a little bit. There's some concern there because it hasn't happened the past 3 weeks, and then, we have the same spot that Brandon Cooks was in, we have with Marvin Jones.
Yeah.
Marvin Jones is 3rd in the NFL in route rate per dropback at 97%. He's got 12 catches on the year. He's done nothing. He was like a hot, like not like a sleeper guy, but a guy everyone thought was undervalued because, he kind of always gets there. At the end of the year, when you look up, like Marvin Jones somehow got there. He goes through these lulls. He has weeks where he's terrible and it's like the wide receiver 60, and he strung a bunch of those together. So maybe this will be a spot, but he's out there. He's out there running around. So, I mean, he's going to be out there running around again in a spot we like. So it's another similar spot to where Brandon Cooks was, except for, we just didn't play Brandon Cooks the week before, or play Marvin Jones the week before and get scorned. So, I mean, hey, he only burned us the first 2 weeks and we chased him, so we can go back and maybe he can make up for it now. But I mean, if you're looking to stack Stafford in that game, and people are, and they're looking to play Galladay, and they probably will look to Hawkinson, I mean, no one's wanted to play Marvin Jones so far, but this is a spot to still take some swings.
So Rich mentioned it, that we need the Jags to bring money to the table for this one to hit. But that's why I love this game for tournaments so much, because it seems to me like an either or situation, because you don't have to squint to see it fail. Like Pat Thorman from the Established to Run wrote up in his snaps column, Jags run the 2nd slowest offense in neutral game script and the 10th fewest combined plays. So there's a chance that perhaps this game doesn't get there despite everyone already talking about it this week. So those are the games we love in tournaments though, because even if the total continues increasing and we can see easy approaches and ways this game fails, then you can just also get off this one.
It's interesting. I'm looking at the chat, and it sort of speaks to how DFS players have become sharper. And we mentioned the name Will Fuller earlier. And, last year he had like 4 or 5 or 6 terrible games in a row. And then all of a sudden he was a super chalky play. And it's like everybody was on it because the spot was amazing. And he had all those air yards. And he had like 2 or 3 touchdowns and 200 yards. And people in the chat, we got ripples in the waves talking about Marvin Jones being a good GBP play. And yeah, I was on him week 1. I was on him week 2, and he's been a disaster even since then. He was not terrible necessarily, but I think he's progressively getting worse. But it's all about this week and this week only, and he's well positioned this week. And like the same thing with Cooks, we saw it last week where there was 15% of the field still played him after the donut because the spot was still good despite the fact he failed the previous week. What happened last week is not necessarily going to happen this week is an important thing to note. But Hribar, here's my concern, and maybe I'm overthinking it. And yes, that Stafford to Galladay combination is an awesome tournament play. It's going to be pretty popular as far as pairings go. Jacksonville runs at the 32nd pace in the league, so they are the slowest team in all of football. Detroit's 31st when it comes to DVOA against the run. My concern is like Stafford and Galladay is going to be chilling on the sidelines. I know Jacksonville's not known for ripping off like 8-minute drives, but why can we not see? Why is it not plausible that we can have like a 12-play Robinson run that lasts like 10 minutes and all my dudes are sitting on the sideline? I'm overthinking it here or what?
I mean, you just have to hope that the Lions lose the toss and they get the ball first because opponents have scored on 61% of their possessions against the Jaguars, which is by far the highest rate in the league. So they go out and they get a lead and you take it and you go there. Because I mean, Robinson is still, he's an interesting play because the matchup obviously is telling you like, hey, this is a team you can run on. They're giving up a ton of points to running backs, the league high 22.3 rushing points per game. Robinson has had his role extended. I mean, we talk about how bad they've been losing games, and he still the last 2 weeks has 21 touches, 18 touches. His routes run have gone up the past 2 weeks. Through 3 weeks, he was at 11 routes, 13 routes, 14 routes. He's been at 24 routes and 21 routes the past 2 games. Chris Thompson is still there running routes too, but it's extended for him. So he's been involved in the pass game a little bit. We've seen that extend. I mean, he's a guy you can, I think, take some shots on. I don't think that necessarily he's in a spot that I typically like to play in cash if they're going to be trailing by a lot, but he's definitely a run back option here in that game, especially if you're wrong about it, because the inversely it can play as well too. I mean, if somehow the Jaguars are a live dog and they're running well, it puts Stafford and those guys in a position to maybe point chase, and you're getting more dropbacks out of those guys. And we'll see what happens with that. And then if you want to take a shot, I mean, obviously I think Laviska Shenault will be kind of intriguing, based on his last 2 games. He now leads the team in targets and receptions now in the season. The only problem with Shenault, I think, is where you can get cookie jarred is he does not have an end zone target on the season yet. So, I mean, he's a guy that's been giving you like usable games to where you would want to start him in like a season-long league or put him in a flex spot or for your bye week guys. But from a DFS stance of popping, over a salary, like you need touchdowns. And, granted, he could just break the seal. He hasn't had one yet. So doesn't mean he can't get one in the future. But, no end zone targets is we want to see our guys get the rock in the end zone.
Robinson actually hit season highs in targets and target share last week as well. The only issue is Jacksonville, the scheme they're running under Jay Gruden, this fast-paced first read offense, 6 different guys have 20 targets. So that's the only concern here. It's like really spread out. And like, that's why I would just hate myself and roster Chris Conley and not watch the game if DJ Shark is out, even though I expect DJ Shark to play. But I'm just saying, like, Chris Conley is absolutely an option.
They've run 19 plays inside the 10-yard line this year, and they have 2 runs.
Oh. Does that include the James Robinson fumble when he's trying to throw the ball from last week?
That was rough, man. It's a rough play call.
I lost points on that fumble, and that's why. Right. So it's like one of those situations, like Olamide, for instance, who we'll probably talk about later, but it's just like flop lag, right? Where he was the correct play last week. He did not get there. And now, although he still seems like a very good play, more people will be off of him. So I don't know if I'll roster James Robinson at the end of this week, but right now I do think he's a good play.
So what about Minshew? If they're just throwing the ball inside the 20, inside the 5, inside the 10 every single time, look, all fantasy points count. Style points don't matter. Doesn't matter when you score him, no matter what the scoreboard is. He's certainly so clearly like, a Ryan Fitzpatrick in training, he's grooming for the next 15 years or whatever it may be. How do we feel about Minshew? Hribar, are you in or are you out?
I'm pretty hesitant just because when I was on, I was talking this game earlier with Joe Hoka, and, he had brought up, just Minshew's career stats against man versus zone and how the Lions are one of the most man heavy teams. Granted, they are bad. They're a bad man coverage team. But, Minshew's career splits are versus man versus zone are like very night and day and very alarming. So we'll see how those play out. But he is, he's been like a safe floor guy. You know, he's been kind of doing these guys that just kind of gets you as like, he's like never a top 10 QB, but like never outside of the top 15. He just kind of like stays like right in that plateau. He's another guy too. He hasn't really run around as much as we kind of were hoping he was as he did last year either, but he's kind of one of those just like solid floor play guys, which is I think tough to play in DFS for the reasons we've talked about. Is just that quarterbacks have been getting so over that your 20 points at the position when you have to pay for it aren't necessarily as great right now as they were in years past.
Yeah, to your point, 21 fantasy points per game in the 4 games with GJ Shark. The issue is 21 points this year is not the same as 21 points last year. So it's just kind of tough.
Derek Carr's like reeling off 20 points a week. So that's like
crazy
where we are.
He was great last week from a fantasy perspective there against Kansas City. And it's weird. You look at that score. It's like, why didn't the Kansas City skill players do things? But like, it's just a weird box score there for KC. Outside of Kelsey, I think Kelsey had a big game.
That's them though, man. Like,
yeah.
I mean, granted we don't have to dive into the Chiefs, but that's their offense. Like a lot of people think like Tyreek Hill is like a boomer bust player. Like Tyreek Hill is like a floor touchdown dependent player.
Mm-hmm.
You look at like his past like year and a half playing football. Tyreek Hill is like a great like 4 to 5 catch guy, but he's got 300-yard games. Like over his past 13 games played. Like he's a guy that gets there on touchdowns and getting like 4 to 5 yards and like, or 4 to 5 catches and like 75 yards. It's like where Tyreek Hill's like wheelhouse has been. They spread the ball around. They're not like they're for like individual pieces outside of Kelsey because of the position he plays. Like they don't drop a lot of hammers.
We got anything else as far as this game, or shall I move on?
I think we covered it.
Do want to mention the link is actually in chat right now. If you guys want to get $5 off your first month of RG's Core4 Premium, feel free to click that link. That's football, baseball, basketball, and golf. As far as the Core 4, feel free to check that out. They were asking about in chat about the ownership projections. That's something you can get, of course, as well. They're not out just yet. They're asking about Mixon's ownership projection. I don't think it's out. At least I checked before the show. I have the lineup HQ and probably drops in the morning or sometime later on this evening. But again, we're recording this just on a Wednesday night. All right, Green Bay, Tampa, 54.5 is the total. Is that right? Green Bay is a 1-point favorite in Tampa. Is that a weird number? Is that just, do I think that's strange? I think it's strange. I feel like Tampa should be a slight favorite. Is that wrong, Daigle? Is that correct?
It's correct. I was curious if anyone had a lean on the over here because, like, I have that gut burning intuition feeling of an over and like perhaps Tampa Bay's team total, but there's still a lot to sort out. This is a weird game because I don't care about Green Bay being undefeated, but Green Bay's offense has been very good, and we have to wait and see how the Bucs injuries shift out because there's just a lot going on with their injury report right now.
To be honest, I pulled that number from the RG lineups page as far as just team totals. So maybe there's not an official line in Vegas because Evans and Godwin are currently questionable. Even Scotty Miller, speaking of running laps or whatever, doing exercising every bar. He's on team exercise for sure. At least he was last week. What do you have for me as far as Tampa? And like, what we're talking about, it's hard to project because as of right now, what's the story with Evans? We don't know. Godwin, same deal. Even Miller is questionable. I don't know how to analyze this when we have no incomplete information, but fire away, do your best.
I mean, the way Evans has kind of been on the trajectory, I would assume that he's playing. He's kind of done this every week, been not practiced early in the week and then comes back late, rallies, plays, kind of banged up. I'm kind of interested in the over here too. We'll talk about it, in a second, why I think that Tampa Bay is a hard team though in these types of games for reasons that we kind of discussed with the Chiefs though. Like we've seen it against the Chargers where Brady throws 5 touchdowns and they go to 5 different guys. I think that there's a lot of that going on in that offense where it's kind of Patriot-ish. That's what Brady's brought to the table. Like I think it's going to be a situation where it oscillates, who's like the guy for Tampa Bay that hits, or if it's a game where it's spread out. I think that's kind of offense they're operating in this year. Mike Evans, you talked about Jonnu Smith and like his potential regression. Well, I mean, Mike Evans, like he's just living in the paint. 42% of his PPR points are just from touchdowns alone. In the 2 games that he's played with Chris Godwin, he's got 3 catches for 3 touchdowns. So I mean, we won't see that happen and be sticky. I think he'll definitely have more catches than just touchdowns, but we haven't seen him really involved, and that could be part of the the reason, like we talked about, where it just gets spread around and matchups kind of dictate that. Definitely in week 1 when he was injured, and Marshawn Lattimore and he have always had like this rivalry. Maybe some targets didn't go there, but even in the Denver game where he actually had a good positive matchup if you go by that the cornerback individual matchups, and he only had the 2 catches, but they were in the paint, and he's catching short touchdowns too, so they're getting him involved in design plays there. But the Bucs just might be one of those teams that are like that. when you see if Leonard Fournette plays, because, Ronald Jones has been really good the past 2 weeks, without Leonard Fournette as a tackle breaker, still has issues, in the passing game and things that he almost had a drop and a touchdown reception on one play. That's like the story of Ronald Jones. He's clearly talented, and for all the negatives that he has, like, he makes plays where you can see like why you'd want to invest in this guy and live through some of the dry spells, but then he does like weird things, off and on that you just are just like, yeah, that's pretty head scratching. But yeah, when I look at the Bucs side, I think that they definitely can get there on this Packers team, because the Packers team is scoring so many points. I don't think that the Bucs are going to be a team that even slows them down, as we've seen even with a couple weeks ago against the Chargers, because what the Bucs do is they stop the run well, and that's kind of what we don't want to do. You'd probably rather have the Packers running on you right now than Rodgers throwing the ball, especially with Devonte Adams coming back. The way Rodgers has been playing, I think you'd want to invite more teams to run the football on you than having Rodgers drop back and throw it a bunch of times. But yeah, that's kind of where like the starting point is looking at it, more from a Packers perspective, because the Bucs side is, like you said, really hard to figure out.
We don't talk season long much on this show, but Mike Evans is like a clear sell high personally to me, just because like 22% target share in 3 games with Chris Godwin, and then 11% in the 2 games without. And as Rich said, he's averaging a touchdown every 6 targets and a touchdown every 4 catches. It's just like insane efficiency right now.
He had those 2 1-yard touchdowns in Denver. I think it was 2 catches, 2 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns and 22 catches or something like that. Yeah. Most likely that's not going to be that's hard to project going forward to stay the same. Devonte Adams, we can project. He was practicing today, so I presume he's going to start this week at Tampa. He is the raw points, the top wide receiver. I think Daigle confirmed, deny.
Oh, baby. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is Megatron compared to DeAndre Hopkins. Like, Devonte Adams, remember, against the Saints before the bye, week 4, he was ruled out, and he tweeted furiously. He was pissed the team didn't let him play, and then deleted it because he was good to go personally. And so they held him out another 2 weeks. So we're basically getting Devonte Adams on 21 days of rest, who practiced in full on Wednesday. Didn't just practice, was 100% healthy. And from week 9, when he returned from injury last year, through week 1, which was the last game he played fully healthy, he saw double-digit targets in 10 of those 11 contests. Their 2 playoff games included, and has not seen a target share under 22%. His target share dipped below 30% in only 3 of those games. So, I mean, not only the pay-up spot, but man, anywhere you go with the Bucs or the Packers, I can just imagine him being in every single one of my lineups this week.
Yeah. Hribar, I assume you're on board with Adams as well?
Yeah, because like I said, I mean, you've got a pass funnel defense, and we'll see how the injury to Vita Vea impacts, how well that they stop the run. But we're in a similar spot to where the Packers were a couple weeks ago against the Saints, only against a better run D, and Rodgers was incredible without Devonte Adams. And now Allen Lazard isn't going to play. So there's even more, opportunity for him until someone steps up and really threatens him. I don't know if Big Bob Tonyan's that guy to really threaten Devonte Adams' target share. I would assume it's not as good as, Big Bob was in that last Monday night game we've seen. And, when you look at wide receiver ones against Tampa Bay, even, as good as, Carlton Davis has played, I mean, Keenan Allen still had 8 catches against them. Allen Robinson still had 10 catches last week against them. Robbie Anderson had 9 catches against them. I mean, there's still opportunity there, especially if we're going to get a lot of dropbacks. And like I said, the way Rodgers is playing this year, he's looked so great even without Devonte Adams. He didn't play 2-week games without Devonte Adams. He played a game without Lazard and like a skeleton crew. And he's had a light schedule, but he has not looked like the Aaron Rodgers we have had since 2014. He's kind of really turned back that clock in a sense, and he's just been phenomenal. He's playing great football, and if we're going to get that quality of Aaron Rodgers with Devonte Adams, I'm kind of all in as well, because he hasn't played. People are not worried about his health, and then people have been talking about this Carlton Davis kid, so people are going to see that too and maybe lock in. But yeah, I mean, I am in. I think this game is a shot to go over. I just wish, like I said, I had more clarity on the Bucs side, because Tom Brady's brought his, Patriotish way, kind of to that offense.
No offense to people who write about cornerback wide receiver matchups, but imagine not playing Devonte Adams because Carlton Davis. Imagine.
I mean, I think it's kind of like BBP with baseball. I think it's something. It's not nothing, but I think a lot of people overvalue it. Like it's one of the 10 components or whatever number of components to like consider and factor. But
it's It's the
so
it's the cloud in the puzzle piece that doesn't matter. You can't find it on the table because it's just mixed in with white.
And
colors.
if you believe this game is going to get there, we've hinted upon just how good the Bucs run D has been, and they're phenomenal. But they give up a ton of work in the passing game out of the backfield. So I mean, Aaron Jones is a guy who can catch the ball, and people aren't going to want to play him because they're going to see that little number next to his a poor matchup. And I don't think he's a cash game play either, but I mean, he could be a guy that, if we believe this game's going to get there, he can catch the ball. And we obviously know he's got some of the most immense touchdown potential of any running back on any slate.
Jamal Williams outsnapped Aaron Jones in week 4, but it literally didn't matter. Aaron Jones was still the RB7 on the entire week because he's just always uber efficient with his catches. 100% catch rate, 5 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown. Aaron Jones had a 14% target share in week 1 with Devonte Adams. And then the last 2 games without Devonte Adams also had a 14% target share. So I don't imagine he's the one whose target share dips. Like Rich said, it makes it easier for DFS than season long, right? Because they jacked up Bob Tonyan's price to where we can't even pay for him. But even if that wasn't the case, he's the guy I was fading anyhow. In those first 2 games with Devonte Adams, he totaled 3 targets and a 4.2% target share. And then the last 2 games, 11 targets, a 17% target share. So to me, he's the one who goes here. And then I would be interested in Rodgers, Adams, and Aaron Jones, and then running it back with, ex-Bucs player, depending on who. You got me?
Yep. Oh, I lost audio for a second. I assume everybody's still good to go.
No, just me. Sorry. Silver walked in on the phone with the beer mid podcast. So, you can't control everything in life.
Wait, he's not holding a giant jug of water?
One quick note on one quick note on the Jamal Williams thing. So the reason his snaps came out funky. So he always spells Aaron Jones for a drive, and what happens is he also always plays in the 2-minute offense. So those 2 drives ended up butting against each other that Monday night game, where he was in the spell drive, and then they got the ball back and were in the 2-minute drill with 1:40 left. So he had an extra possession than he typically gets.
And it's always exaggerated on island games, right? The same thing as Tanya's performance. It always lingers in your brain a little bit more, and no one can think straight because it was highlighted to the world.
Is Aaron Jones hurt? Why is he not in the game? That's
all you see. Good. That's the only answer. Aaron Jones is just flat good.
That's the problem is you're paying workhorse prices for a guy that's not a workhorse. But like you said, he's super efficient, but I don't know if you can rely on that efficiency every single game. It's a thinner route, but he's still awesome. And by the way, just a callback to how terrible tight end is this week. You guys mentioned Tonyan. He's the 6th most expensive tight end on DK. Life comes at you fast. 2nd most expensive tight end on Fanduel, which is just insane. That tight end is so bad. Give me a flex spot instead of a tight end. Give me 2 flex spots. Who says no?
Just play Irv Smith and go away. Just don't watch your lineup.
Oh man, I just create. There you go. Some site do that. Give us 2 flex throughout the tight end, just like in baseball. I don't know why I'm talking baseball. They get rid of the catcher some places. Let's turn that into a flex spot. All right, good to go. Anything else as far as Green Bay? We're moving on to the kind of position by position. I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Rich hit on it, but you just have to look for Leonard Fournette. I think he'll be back. In these past 2 games, Ronald Jones has received 46 of Tampa Bay's 55 running back touches. But again, with Leonard Fournette back and LaShawn McCoy suddenly limited at practice, let's just wait and find out.
All right, quarterbacks this week. The quarterbacks we have not talked about. Lamar. Why is Lamar not getting a ceiling game? He didn't run that much last game. Is there something to it? Is there some sort of correlation? I know he was ill, and he also had some sort of I think it was a knee injury they were saying during practice. He was limited. He did practice in full on that Friday, but didn't run that much. But we haven't had that distinct Lamar game we were used to, kind of spoiled by last year. There was some regression projected just because he was just out of this world. Are we back on Lamar? Is it going to happen this week, Hribar?
I didn't see today, but he was something I wanted to try to earmark it, and then I fell out of the pocket there.
He was full today, not even on the injury report.
Okay, because that was one of the things last week is he popped up at the end of the week and didn't practice until Friday, and then he didn't run, and it was like, all right, well, what's the story here?
Yeah. A season high in pass attempts last week, yeah.
Yeah, and a career low in rushing attempts and rushing yardage. 2 carries, the lack of designed runs obviously were there. So it was one of those when you're watching it and checking in, it's like, well, how much was this game plan related to his scare? And I wanted to see his practice, but him healthy and practicing definitely gives you more of a positive sign. The ceiling hasn't been there. Part of the problem is that these teams aren't pacing them, and he laid the egg against the Chiefs but also the other games, like they've just kind of cruised. They've kind of cruised through. So it's not like he's had an opportunity to really be challenged, to really press the issue either, because that's how regression happens. I mean, he wasn't just going to light everyone up this year for 5 touchdowns and, 9 yards per attempt and, a 9% touchdown rate. Like that wasn't going to happen. We knew those things were going to come down. So we were hoping he would be in some more combative game scripts to kind of keep his dropbacks going. And he had the dropbacks last week, but I don't know what the story was with the relationship between his phantom injury and unknown injury and him not being game planned and to run the ball. So we'll see. I mean, he's probably not a guy I'm going to go to just because I've been a little hesitant on that to see it out. But I mean, if you can get advantage of it, you always can with Lamar because we know it exists, the rushing component. I was on him that week against Washington and he got there. It wasn't a super smash though, but I don't know. I need to rethink it more throughout the week when you see him practice in full.
That's the thing here, though, is that there's really not a lot of places to pay up at quarterback. So you either go contrarian and do it there, or you go down to the dumps, which I'm totally fine with as well. This is a really good quarterback week. Like you had mentioned earlier, Dean, this slate was odd, but it's a really good one where you can pay down and be confident because anyone can match anyone practically, it feels like, in this slate.
When you say pay down and be confident and be in the dumps, I feel like you're talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick versus the Jets. Is that what you're talking about?
I mean, that's a good matchup, but that's actually not who I'm talking about. I only have the numbers from these past 4 games since the season opener. He played in Foxborough, and it was a 3-pick dud. But in the past 4 games, he's been a QB1 every single week. Smashed last week. I believe he finished as the QB3 after Ryan Tannehill was a QB1 or 2 on the entire week. Fitzpatrick is a good option, although 8-point favorites, I believe, over the Jets last time I looked, makes it more of a Myles Gaskin game, who we'll talk about in a bit. Let's talk about the game environment we all want to discuss. And I think Kirk Cousins is in a similar situation to Patrick Mahomes and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and who in this analogy is Alexander Madison last week, because the public and ownership throughout the week got very high on pivoting off CEH in tournaments because he was going to be so high rostered in cash games and tournaments. And that seems to be the pivot this week because you need everything to go right, but everything could go right against this awful Falcons secondary that's allowing the most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And in this situation, Cousins, Thielen, and Jefferson are practically Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce. And that also gets you off and gets you leverage away from Alexander Madison tournaments. It could happen, but you also need Matt Ryan to basically not be unusable like he's been the past 3 weeks. So I think you need Julio Jones there as well. And on Wednesday, Julio Jones didn't practice. So a lot of moving pieces, but as the week goes on, and if Julio Jones shows up, I think Kirk Cousins is going to become a pretty popular option in tournaments to get off of Alexander Madison.
So a couple of things as far as this game. I like to play a game. Like I like to try to guess what games you guys are going to feature, the 3 games we're going to talk about. I thought this would be on the board. I thought, did it just miss? I feel like it just missed.
We talked about the Falcons last week, and this week was the lottery ticket where I beat Rich to the email, our very fancy show doc that everyone knows about, that all we do is just email each other. I'm mid-run, and I look at my email, and I just send somebody the games.
I mean, as long as Matt Ryan is playing without Julio Jones, like it's hard to believe that they're going to do their part.
Yeah, it's busto.
54.5 total in a dome. Minnesota's got a 30-point projection. I'm assuming working on the assumption that Cook's not going to play this week. And the thing is, we talk about team totals all the time, but understanding the pie and how things are split up. And Minnesota is very, very clear. It's like old school Pittsburgh. Like you know where everything's going. It's going to go to presumably Madison is going to get a big chunk, and he's basically going to be Cook as far as I'm concerned, maybe 90% of, however you want to talk about it. Thielen and then Jefferson is interesting as well too, but that's basically it. But my issue is, Hribar, Minnesota, especially if they're up and they're projected to be up, and Atlanta, I know they changed their whole regime. If they had their druthers, they would just run the ball 40 times and let Cousins just hand it off all day. And you'll tilt your face off if you have we've seen Cousins throw the ball 14 times some games. That just happens, and I don't want that for my quarterback. And he can't run either; he has no legs. So what's my out?
27 or fewer pass attempts in every game but one. He actually had, and then it was the second half of the game when they got challenged. They finally started throwing against Seattle, and Seattle fought back. But at first half of that game, it was a nightmare. Where Seattle had 3 possessions. Oh, and we were just dying. I was watching that game just on super death tilt. Just especially, I'm on a main event team that has a Russ DK stack, and I was waiting for that to get going. So we need the Falcons to do their part. We just do in that game. But I think from a leverage stance, Daigle's 100% spot on though. it's a clear leverage play, and you run it back with Ridley because he's the only guy you could trust.
Yep.
And we talked about it with Zacchaeus last week when people wanted to play him, and there was more to the play than just Zacchaeus being good. But there was a reason when you look at Zacchaeus' line from 2 weeks ago, and it was 8 for 86, but then you combined Ridley's 0 and Russell Gage's 22. Like, that was improbable again to happen, and then we seen them just jam a bunch of targets to Ridley again, and Zacchaeus went bye-bye. That's what we were kind of, contingent on, and I don't think there's reason that the Vikings are going to really slow him down either, from getting targets. So I think it is a great spot for Ridley to get jammed with targets. He was healthy last week and, it bounced back in that regard of, running routes. It was up again, still below where he was the start of the season, but way up over that Monday night game. But I think Daigle's spot on, though. That's the clear leverage play.
Calvin Ridley has become Julio in this span. Russell Gage has not become Calvin Ridley in this span.
No.
So it's pretty easy. I don't know if Rich has any more. My only other one is Cam Newton, who's not injured. He was sick. He'll be back at practice reportedly on Thursday, so he's going to play this game. And he was averaging the 7th most fantasy points among all quarterbacks and has only 6 fewer carries than Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson, despite playing 2 fewer games. And best of all, you don't have to stack them either. If you're struggling at quarterback, don't believe in any of the guys available this week, just want the rushing floor, that's okay. You play him by himself, and then you figure out the rest of your lineup.
So we mentioned Zacchaeus. I know we're not on receivers, but this figures that's worth throwing out there, Hribar. Jeff Smith is still 3K on DK. He had 11 targets last week, a bunch of air yards. Of course, they're coming from Flacco, so understand that. Maybe efficiency won't be there. Another exercise guy, another team exercise, Hogan, I believe, is going to be out for a while. He'll get the IR, I want to say.
IR, high ankle sprain.
Yeah, Perriman may be back. We'll see.
Mims might be back, too. Mims was activated, too.
Oh, okay. So then that would throw away Jeff Smith.
Well, you just have to watch it, David. Like, Mims is eligible to practice, but I don't think they activated him. Is that what it was? I can't remember.
Yeah, correct. He's just still on IR. We don't know. And it's Adam Gase. Like, we don't know what he's going to do. He played Piron 0 snaps. Like, we don't know what he's going to do.
No.
Well, he did cut Bell for what it's worth.
Like, I have played much worse players in much worse situations than Jeff Smith and DFS. I just close my eyes and play guys based on the numbers. I don't care at all. But man, 23 yards and 11 targets from Joe Flacco is something special. That may even make me turn the other way, to be honest.
But again, if I tell you you're getting 11 targets, I'm not telling you
minimum
for 3K, you take it.
At minimum, you are right. I know.
Yeah, I can't tell you that for the record, but in theory, if I could, I would play him. Do we have any
thoughts
as far as
there? A guy named Jeff Smith just doesn't do it for me, man.
That's a janitor somewhere. No offense.
I need a proof of life. I don't think he's a real person. I don't think he exists. He's just in the box score. Atlanta regime changes. Is that anything to factor in here, Hribar, or just kind of like stay tuned?
Yeah, I mean, still Dirk Cutter calling plays.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and last time Raheem Morse was a head coach, it did not go well. So.
I mean, nothing. I don't think changes offensively to how they're approaching things. Where there was a Houston shakeup in play calling. It's still Dirk Cutter. I think they're going to come out and do what they do.
Daigle Madison is 7.2K on DK. I think he's 7K on Fanduel. That's a fair price, and I know there might be some sticker shock for some people, but then not to point to Mike Davis and seeing what he's doing, and he's basically giving you CMC for 30% off, whatever it is. And this is kind of sort of what Cook would be as far as his price, but the matchup is nice here against Atlanta, especially from a passing perspective. Receptions out of the backfield. We like this atmosphere. We expect they want to run the ball if they have their druthers there in Minnesota. So are you concerned at all that it's not Cook? And if it's Madison, he's basically going to get the Cook role, right?
Oh, yeah. I would imagine so. I know people have mentioned Mike Boone, but Madison outtouched Mike Boone 23-2. Mike Boone isn't a factor here, although I do think he's actually still the better player. So if Dalvin Cook is out, and with Minnesota's bye this upcoming week, I would expect the team to hold their cards close to their vest, not release anything, but still not allow Cook to practice. And then on Saturday or whatever, say, oh, Cook's inactive, surprise, you're still going to beat the winless Falcons by 40 points. So if Dalvin Cook is out, I'm still playing Alexander Madison everywhere. I fully expect him to have that role. And then, yeah, like I said, in tournaments, though, there's still nothing wrong with leveraging yourself off of Alexander Madison. But in cash games, if Cook is out, 100%. That's where I'm going.
Yeah, Hribar, your thoughts as far as Madison. I do want to say, you said the sites priced them up. DK priced them up. Fanduel priced them up. He's $14 on Yahoo. That's $4 above the floor. I don't know how you don't play him. I mean, I suppose if you're MMEing, you can get off it a little bit, but that's an amazing price. He should be at least double that price. And I don't know if you guys play at Yahoo much, but that's a really, really good price for Madison, and it's just a lock and load in cash, not even a conversation. For fun, I ran a bunch of optimals on Yahoo, and he was at 100% because, like, of course, he's at 100% at $14. Your thoughts, Hribar, as far as Madison?
Yeah, and that's what you have to remember too. Even when a guy is chalky, like, remember, even if a guy's 35% or like, you can always go 100. You can always hit that lock button.
It's football and goofy things happen, unfortunately, injuries. But yeah, it's the math. It's so hard from the miss outside of like an injury. That's
Dalvin Cook's target share has been double digits in 2 of the past 3 games. So like you could also go Cousins and Madison if you want, and then bring it back with Ridley. Like there are other ways to play it and still get Ridley in your lineup.
Hribar, what do you have for me as far as other running backs? I guess Davis, you mentioned in passing. He's still too cheap in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of a little mini McCaffrey. I mean, he's had 91, 111, 149 yards. He has 30 catches over the past 4 games. Just really locked in. That scheme, that's the scheme, is getting him the ball and then the receiving game. And we talked about them last week, just their lack of depth at the position, and he's not coming off the field. He's actually getting paid by the Bears still, which is kind of fun in this game. He's actually on their 20. They're not paying him. He's just on their books. They've already paid him. So that's kind of fun too in that game. The Bears can be run on a little bit too. They are beatable on the ground. They're mid-pack in rushing points allowed. But just the amount of touches and receiving work, I'm with you again. I mean, granted, he does have a touchdown in every game, but that's kind of what McCaffrey is doing still too, catching a bunch of passes and getting in the box. So no problem with him. I think he's still fine. His counterpart, I mean, listen, no one wants to play David Montgomery. I get it. I mean, I don't want to click the David Montgomery button. He's not fun on any level. But since Street Cohen's been out, he's played 86 and 82% of the team snaps. He has 100% of the backfield touches. He's run 35 and 31 pass routes. He is playing a Panthers team that tricked us for 1 week because they stopped Kenyon Drake, or maybe Kenyon Drake stopped himself like he has in every matchup. But then they allowed the ghost of Todd Gurley to have his first 100-yard rushing game in 21 regular season games last week. They're right back to giving up running back points. They're not going to have K'Wan Short, who is put on IR for the rest of the season. Brian Burns might not play. I know no one wants to play Dave Montgomery, but he's in a true bell cow role in a great matchup. The only thing he doesn't have going for him is they're not at home. But he's so cheap, man. Like, Dave Montgomery is so cheap. He's really hard for me not to like just gravitate towards, except for the fact his name is Dave Montgomery.
Ronald Jones ran for 100 yards last Thursday night. Meanwhile, David Montgomery averaged 2.9 yards per carry. Yet David Montgomery outscored Ronald Jones on DraftKings because his passing game opportunity has become elite with 14 targets now, back-to-back games with career highs in targets since Tariq Cohen went out. It's like, David Montgomery is never in the smash spot because his name is David Montgomery and he can't break any tackles. But like, if there was ever an eruption spot, like, this is it for David Montgomery.
Daigle, I know you're excited before you teased it. Let's talk about Myles Gaskin.
So Myles Gaskin was already a workhorse, not a bell cow, because Jordan Howard is in his way. 21 touches in 2 of Miami's last 3 games and an increasing snap rate. Then Jordan Howard surprisingly healthy scratched, and Myles Gaskin got season high 5 touches inside the 10-yard line, and the team's only carry inside the 5-yard line. And now this team is 8-point favorites over the Jets. So, of course, I want Myles Gaskin because they're not going to get Matt Breida or Patrick Laird involved. Like, maybe Lynn Bowden will sprinkle in for a couple carries, but it doesn't matter. This is still Myles Gaskin's backfield. He was practically getting high-end RB2 usage despite barely being an RB2. So you can see that positive regression coming from a mile away now that he's also the team's touchdown runner. So, yeah, I love Myles Gaskin this week. Like, I understand Dave Montgomery and Myles Gaskin in 100% of lineups is never going to excite you, but like, they are in such good spots.
That's the theme of the week, though. Your lineups are just not going to excite you. I pulled up a sports book on the fly, by the way, just that conversation about Green Bay and Tampa. Tampa is currently, it's alive. You can bet it. Tampa is a 1-point dog. And you mentioned that Miami line. I think it was 8 earlier, and not too long ago, it's currently 9.5. So
they're catching on.
Yeah. Nobody wants to bet the Jets. And somebody tell me the last time the Dolphins were 9.5-point favorites against anybody. Like, honestly, when was that last time?
I mean, look at Myles Gaskin. Like, just paint the environment. Don't even think about his name as being Myles Gaskin. It's 9.5-point home favorite running back. Just run him out there.
Yeah, with a high target share.
With an extremely high target share.
Is he the most interesting Myles this week? Because we do have a Myles Garrett revenge game of some sort. I don't know what you want to call that, but that'll be interesting.
I do love Myles Garrett trying to murder a man, and then Kareem Hunt coming out this week and saying, this one's for him. This one's for Myles Garrett. Football players, man, they'll just find that chip on their shoulder. Everything they love having that chip.
Backs. Rich, you got some running backs for me?
One last guy I touched on earlier. I mean, Jonathan Taylor, I get it. No one wants to play Jonathan Taylor. They've been scorned. He hasn't looked subjectively great at all. He's not breaking tackles. He's ahead of just, Kenyon Drake and Adrian Peterson in missed tackle rate per touch. But, on a positive note, he did play 56% of the snaps last week in a game the Colts trailed throughout. It was his highest snap share since week 2. We know he's got the goal line carries. The only problem is, the receiving is probably not there. But the spot is a spot you would look to play a guy like Jonathan Taylor. They're a 7-point home favorite. The Cincinnati defense that's 25th in rushing points allowed per game to backfields. They just lost DJ Reader for the season. Geno Atkins came back and only played 19 snaps. He played pretty sparingly. I mean, I know no one wants to play Jonathan Taylor. He was a hot guy that he didn't get there for a lot of people, but I just think the spot is something that you should look at and say, like, I can, swallow my pride and hold my nose and say, like, if he's going to get there, it's going to be in a spot like this. Because he's actually played, matchups that were not great the past 3 weeks. When you look at the teams that he played, I mean, the Browns have been good against the run, against everybody they face. They just got up huge on the Jets and really didn't run at all. And then I'm missing the game off the top of my head as I'm grasping for him between that Browns game and Jets game. But he did there's 20 plus touchdown upside there too.
We got no one cares about defensive players on the show, but there's clearly something going on with Geno Atkins, right? Like there's definitely a contract situation going on that no one's talking about.
Well, what's the story?
It seems like something subtle. And then like Rich said, of course, losing DJ Reader. So yes, that is a situation we attack with Jonathan Taylor, despite the fact he apparently can't break tackles in the NFL.
It's funny you said. I was one of the comments here in chat and YouTube. What up, YouTube? Feel free to like and subscribe. We do appreciate that. Gino Martin saying all the hype on Jonathan Taylor. He looks like the next Trent Richardson. Oh man, that's an insult. Those are fighting words, isn't it? I think maybe he's right. I don't know. He's just not been a fun roster so far in a couple different spots, but yeah, I get the merit for tournaments for sure. Some receivers start us off here. Well, Daigle, what do you have as far as receivers? Who have we not talked about?
If we're doing the Kirk Cousins leverage spot, we can also do the Justin Jefferson leverage spot. So the Vikings actually ran a season high rate of 12 personnel last week, which was a league high in week 5. And that allowed Irv Smith to run a season high rate of dropbacks on routes on Kirk Cousins dropbacks. Also a season high in target share for Irv Smith. But that was only 1 week. We don't know if that was just a game plan against a Jamal Adams left Seattle, or if they'll continue to do that. So we know Justin Jefferson was a factor and was the only factor in the passing game behind Adam Thielen the previous 2 games. So now Justin Jefferson's ownership will be lower. So if you are playing Kirk Cousins to get off of Alexander Madison in tournaments, then I think you have to double stack it with Adam Thielen, who is always part of the game plan, and Justin Jefferson.
What do you have, Hribar?
I like another guy that no one wants to play, Juju. I think this is a good Juju spot. Not a guy that's been exciting to play on any level. He's averaging a career low 9 yards per reception. But I think this is the Steeler offense. I think it's going to oscillate, from these guys week to week. I think we'll see games where Deontay Johnson is a smash. We'll see Claypool where he's a smash. And the matchup dictates how I think Juju will still be involved. We still know he's talented. But, the Cleveland where they've been getting kind of killed at is in the slot. That's, kind of look at Tyler Boyd, 7 for 72 and a touchdown. Willie Snead had 64 yards and a touchdown. CeeDee Lamb, 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's not a guy I'm going to play in cash at any level, but, I definitely think that he's a guy that, given where he's priced, because he's priced higher than he should be, that no one's going to want to touch him. So there's an opportunity to get in on there. And then I think going back to Darius Slayton is fine too this week. Just the amount of target share and downfield targets that he's getting, and he almost really smashed last week if that bogus touchdown counts for the phantom PI. And we all played him anyway, so we all would have shared the points. But I think you can go back to him this week as well.
Oh, yeah, that was a bummer for sure. We'll talk about tight ends in a second. I want to bring up the conversation as far as the Colts tight ends because, hey, let's just talk about it now since I brought it up. They have 3 different tight ends, and they have Phillip Rivers throwing them the ball. Like, I don't know, and I don't know who's going to be the guy. What's that, whack-a-mole? I don't know which one's going to pop up this week, and I don't want to play that game, but tight end stinks. So what do I do, Daigle?
I mean, you don't have to play the Colts tight ends, but I know which ones it's going to be. It's going to be Trey Burton. Like that's who they've used. He's led the team in routes. He's also led the team with the tight ends with routes. The tight ends with 11 targets to Jack Doyle's 3 and Mo Alley Cox's 3 in that span. I believe the last 2 games, Mo Alley Cox has only ran 18 routes, 12 routes, something like that. Like he's the one,
ridiculous,
despite being clearly the most athletic of the bunch, is being thrown out the way. And they keep saying like, oh no, like don't worry, this week Mo Alley Cox will be integrated. They literally say that about every single player. The Colts do as much coach speak.
He's being Janus, man. He's being Janus. Every time he gets an opportunity, he's amazing, and he's Janus.
Yep, totally.
That's a term in the vernacular. I wasn't aware of that. For Jeff Janus, I presume?
It's going to be Trey Burton, but I'm still not ever going to play Trey Burton most likely in my life. There aren't many options, to be honest. This is one of the worst weeks for tight end in league history. No exaggeration. And so to me, it's pretty clearly like Darren Fells, I guess, if Jordan Akins is out. I have Irv Smith highlighted only because he also his salary did not change. He is the stone minimum, $2,500. And so you just take the chance. He runs a few routes. I don't even care if he goes back to week 1 through 4 usage and isn't used. Mm-hmm. He's $2,500. Just play him. We played Adam Troutman. We can play Irv Smith. I don't care.
There's no okay. So opportunity cost is a huge thing with DFS. What is the opportunity cost at tight end? Like, a couple of these guys are probably going to pop, and I suppose you can make the argument for Andrews. Like Andrews, in theory, can outscore the field by 10. Gesicki has some upside as well too there for Miami against the Jets. But yeah, I'm perfectly fine if it makes everything. You don't roster Irv Smith because you love Irv Smith. You roster Irv Smith because of the guys he lets you roster because you're rostering Irv Smith because we live in a world of a salary cap. So if he gets me like 7 points and I love everything else, not that 7 is ideal, but again, what are you missing out on?
I'll take one. I'll take 1 point for 2,500.
That's why I always thought the argument for Troutman versus Zacchaeus, like I favored the Troutman side than the Zacchaeus side. We talked about it last week. Like taking that 3K 0 at wide receiver is a lot different than at tight end.
Right. 100%.
And the Jeff Smiths in that realm, I guess this week too. It's a lot different because it'd be different if there was like guys we have to pay up for, but this slate particularly does not have it. We didn't have it last week either. And part of that is because the receiver position, the top of the receiver position, like there's not been outside DeAndre Hopkins, there's just not been a receiver worth paying for. Maybe that'll change it. We get Adams back, Michael Thomas is coming back. And throughout the weeks, like we'll have those guys at the top where you say, all right, well, this guy is getting 12 targets a game and he's smashing too. We've got to entertain using some of these guys because we can't win without them. That hasn't been the case this year on any level. So when you're taking these punts at, even at wide receiver and you're saying, well, oh yeah, I'm saving this money, but it's not getting me an extra player. Like I'm already playing the guys I want to play because at wide receiver, we've just been playing guys out of that mid-range tier repeatedly. That's all we've been doing is playing guys out of that tiir.
Yeah. And you also don't have the running backs you necessarily have to have this week either.
Right.
It's a weird,
no
Kamara,
no Zeke.
No CMC. Yes. Well, CMC might play for what it's worth, but even if he does come back, I can't imagine.
Matt Rule actually said they're not going to activate him this week. It's another Mike Davis week.
Okay, awesome. I didn't see that before the show. Thank you.
You don't take away the revenge game.
I didn't realize that.
You don't take away the best running back on the team.
Whoa.
I'm sorry.
But I mean, listen, we don't have to get into that now, but it's something to say when you take a guy like Christian McCaffrey off the field, though, and a team just feels like the offense runs differently when you're not obligated to give a guy 30 touches. And,
it's going to be really frustrating whenever he comes back for his first game and Mike Davis plays 3 snaps again. That's what's going to be most aggravating.
I think he's going to eat away to some degree.
Mike Davis ain't splitting touches, buddy. Like
he's going
back to the bench once McCaffrey's healthy.
He's getting like 15%, isn't he?
No.
He didn't earn 15%.
This is McCaffrey's backfield. No way. Okay. Like they don't care. Like Matt Rule is such an analytically, like mentally driven coach. This dude created a sports science program in college previously before being hired for the NFL. He knows the numbers. He knows everything. He's such a smart dude. So they don't care about that. They're going to play Christian McCaffrey.
I wish every team in the NFL approached things that way from a science perspective.
I agree. It's very much the smarter approach. Yeah.
I still flip out when announcers like go nuts, like, oh, they're going to roll the dice and go for it in 4th and 1 from the other team's 39.
That's why, again, I'm going to say it anyways, not the part here to say on the show, but I just started feeling good for guys getting paid. I'm so done with running backs don't matter. Just pay the guy. They're great. Melvin Gordon's a really fun dude when you see him in interviews. Just pay him. It's fine. Whatever. I don't care.
By the way, you saw you got a DUI. How much? A good segue there, but
I should not. I actually forgot about that when I said that, so I shouldn't have said that. But
Yeah.
He was having a good time over wine before he got in the car. Kids don't get in the car.
We don't know if he's going to play this week. For
where are people going still? Like,
I don't know. I thought the same thing.
The Applebee's around your house. That's where they're going.
Hey, before we get out of here, Claypool, how real is Claypool? I know he came with a bunch of pedigree. He went nuts last week. You can't project that going forward. Johnson was hurt as well, too. It feels like, Pittsburgh, I referenced it before, like the old school Pittsburgh, you knew exactly where everything was going, Hribar, but now Pittsburgh is just a lot of options, and it's hard to think. It could be Juju, could it be Johnson, assuming he's out there. Could it be Claypool? Could it be the tight end Ebron? Could it be Connor out of the backfield? How do you figure out this Pittsburgh offense? I guess you kind of referenced it before, like you don't know, and it's hard to pick. Basically, everybody's tournament relevant.
Yeah, I think it's going to bounce around. And the difference here, too, is that Ben is, clearly Ben has played well from a fantasy stance, but he's thrown for 239 yards or fewer in 3 of his first 4 games. He's only averaging 7.1 yards per pass attempt. The touchdowns have been there. He's got a 6.9 touchdown rate. But he's not throwing for a ton of volume. He's not throwing for a lot of downfield targets. So I think it's like not a situation where it's all in. I think it's going to oscillate and bounce around week to week. And there's going to be some frustration, especially in a season-long stance. But I think from Claypool, the most encouraging part, because that was probably his highest scoring game of the season. He's not going to score that many points.
Well, what's he going to score, 5?
But the one thing you do appreciate is that they were manufacturing touches for him. It wasn't like he was just thrust in and they gave him targets. They were running end arounds to him, designed screens at the goal line, and out of a stack. They were like saying, like, they were objectively saying, like, we want this guy to touch the ball still. And then he was thrust into just getting a larger role too. So, I mean, those are all positive indicators you want to latch onto, but I think it is going to bounce around. And like I said, Ben, like from an overall volume stance, isn't the guy that's like got a huge pie to share right now of yardage to give away.
I think you guys are both. Oh, jump in. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think it actually becomes more of the Cowboys situation. Now, remember, James Washington is still running 28 routes per game. So we need him to go away for Claypool, like to survive as a wide receiver 2 or 3. But I think it becomes Claypool as Michael Gallup, Deontay Johnson as CeeDee Lamb, and Juju Smith-Schuster as Amari Cooper if I had to like pick how the fallout is.
That's good. I like that. I was just going to ask, you guys are both locked in on season long much more than I am. I'm curious where would Claypool be going forward rest of season, like around 30? Is that a fair number or no? I'm just throwing
We also haven't seen Deontay play a full game since week 2, and he had 23 targets.
I know. My rosters are well aware of that.
And like Eric Ebron's not getting the targets, but like these past 2 games without Deontay, his routes run have actually increased as well. So it's a very finicky offense. It's a hard one to figure out, honestly.
All right. Unless you have somebody else on your sheet there, Hribar, feel free to tell the people where they can find you, and we'll step aside and get out of here.
Yeah. Dev's probably freaking out on us, but sharpfootballanalysis.com. You can find me. I do a weekly show called Pre-Snap Motion with Chad Scott, and I do a weekly podcast called Sharp Angles that is more of a betting, real football talk show with Cleve TA and Dan Pizzuta. So check those out if you get a chance.
Same thing, Daigle?
At Not J Daigle on Twitter. I actually just updated the Roto World waiver wire column because waivers are processing on ESPN and Yahoo tonight and tomorrow AM. So it's still actionable right now, as well as the Roto World football podcast. And then of course I will be back on Sunday morning for Roto World doing start sits that everyone just loves answering every Sunday morning, an hour leading up to kickoff. So that's where you ask them.
I'll be on 3 hours before lock here at Rotogrinders. We go for 3 hours all the way up to lock while I'm rounding up. Well, I'm only on for the first hour, for that to be clear, and then I start making lineups and things like that. I'm relieved by the really sharp people here at RG. Check us out on Sundays, of course. Like and subscribe to the channel. You guys get notifications and all that. Check out the links in chat, too. Sign up for that. The single entry series on Fanduel is awesome. I love that. I can't wait. Week 6 to 13, that's going down. Rotogrinders is sponsoring that, as well as the Core 4. Check out that link as well, too. You get $5 off your first month at RG. We apologize, Devin. You get to play. He's got his Xbox controller in hand. He's been waiting for the last 20 minutes or running long. My apologies. Go ahead and check it out there. You can play some Xbox, Devin. That was Rich. That was John. I was Dean. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your football this week. We're out of here. Holler.